Hello, I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests today for this panel to discuss the value and challenges of adopting new technologies, including artificial intelligence and other new technologies for the benefit of society and business. This is part of the series of talks aimed at democratizing the learning of new technology and data, organized by the World Innovation and Change Management Institute, which is a multidisciplinary global forum for the sharing of knowledge and experience of innovation and change management. I'd like to start by asking our guests to introduce themselves and explain what has been the journey so far, what is they're passionate about in relation to this topic, and then we will move forward to, in a more informal conversational style, discuss for 60 minutes, 1 hour in this panel. So who would like to start introducing themselves, please?
I can start.
Thanks, David.
My name is David Talby. I'm the CTO at John Snow Labs. For the past 10 years, my focus has been on natural language processing, primarily in the healthcare space. So I'm the developer of the Spark NLP, which is an popular open source library for modern natural language processing. But I would say really my passion and a lot of the work we do is in healthcare and life science. And I've been fortunate to see dozens of different companies, healthcare systems, hospitals, software companies, pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, put AI into production for the first time, and help them handle some of the challenges and also some of the internal capabilities they need to build in order to actually make that happen.
Great, thank you.
Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Adam Hill. I'm originally an astrophysicist by training back in the day. I worked as a researcher around the world in a number of different labs before joining a tech startup called HAL24K based out of Amsterdam, working in the smart city space. I helped grow that organization and more recently moved into an organization called ComplyAdvantage, which does financial risk monitoring, financial crime fighting, as we like to describe it, using AI and data in very innovative ways. I'm also a long-standing volunteer in the Data for Good community, working with DataKind UK to get data scientists out into charity and third sector organizations to support their mission and to drive those things forward as well.
Thank you.
Love that. And I'm Heather MacDonald. I'm a principal consultant for workforce transformation. And our work really, it's about both helping people gain the skills that they need to be successful today, but also about creating the foundation so that people have the capabilities and organizations are adaptable enough to navigate the ongoing pace of change. So prior to this role that I'm in today, I worked as the Vice President of Strategy, Change, and Communication for a US-based bank corporation in their Enterprise Technology and Operations division. And before that, I was a Senior Director of Volunteer Strategy, really collaborating across sectors to create systemic change focused, really on that K-12 post-secondary education space. So how do we support people who maybe are in underserved or underrepresented communities, have the access to the tools and opportunities that they need to be successful and to really meet their potential. So I'm absolutely passionate about doing work that creates a more diverse and equitable workplace, where really every role from top to the bottom of the organization has the access to tools and opportunities they need to succeed and build a future that's meaningful for them and that they choose.
That's great, Heather, thank you. Is anything you want to add in terms of how you got where you are at this in your organizations and the work you have been done, David?
I mean, let's see. We have more than 40 kind of public case studies of companies who have built things. I would say if you talk about things that have been kind of in use for, let's say, for more than 3 years, right? We have good production understanding. There are, for example, we've done work with with Kaiser Permanente, with Mount Sinai, with Providence Health, So those are, 3 large healthcare systems, each serving, on its own more than 10 million patients per year. On improving hospital operations, so be able to plan how many open beds am I going to have, how many nurses we will have, being able to predict patient risks. So which cancer patients will likely become metastatic, which psychiatric patients are at high risk to become aggressive, even how likely are people to respond to certain treatments. We've done a lot of work with pharmaceuticals, drug development, real-world evidence, clinical decision support, being able to match patients automatically to clinical trials. So those are all kind of very slow, long-standing challenges in the industry that now we have technologies and we they are being used, and kind of there's this wave, right, to go from really manual processes to trying to put these new techniques to use as quickly as possible, right? And there's the business imperative. There's also definitely the imperative to to actually help people. If you're sick, you need a clinical trial faster, you need a drug faster, right? You need to actually have access to the treatment. You need to be diagnosed correctly. We see all of these things happening, and we also see a lot happening kind of in the startup ecosystem, but also in established companies. In the US, 3 of the largest 10 companies are healthcare companies, right? And they all work with us, and you can see everything from chatbots. And be able to, for example, see immediately when I'm contacting, right, a health organization, is it a clinical emergency, yes or no, right? Really simpler things like giving me the right answers faster, right, on helping me to get lab results or my prescriptions faster. So definitely we see that there's a very big wave of people who are saying, okay, there's a whole new set of things that have really just become possible for the first time. With the advent of machine learning, deep learning, language understanding, and we are just beginning now to actually put it into good use.
So you have a very diverse community from very large organizations like hospitals in the US to smaller healthcare, medical practices, individual practitioners. Is any key aspects that you like to mention about what are the key elements for adoption and supporting these communities at different level of the size, and also in the terms of the journey they have in the adoption of new technologies? Sure.
So yes, we have we have a lot of our work is open source. So we have Spark NLP, which has over 40 million downloads across many countries. We have the annotation lab, which is a free tool, which is used by also several hundred organizations. So I would say from our perspective, one of the things we've seen is that when you do something and people, there is a community that gets built around it, you have to be ready to support that. So there's huge diversity in terms of what people want, and you need to accommodate that. And it's also important to really support people on a one-on-one basis. Right, because at the end, it's not it's not an organization that adopts you. It's like it's a person, right, or a small group of people who actually need to to suffer the design choices you made and documentation and user interface you made, right, and learn how that works. So that's from our side. I would say from an organization perspective, what we see everywhere, people need to understand that this is early days, right, and of a cutting edge, highly innovative product. So the main thing to keep in mind as you're implementing this is, this is a journey, right? And there is an R&D aspect to it, right? So, so especially for more traditional organization where you come and says, look, we know how everything takes, we know how to do each one. We've been doing it kind of the same way. We're very process oriented. R&D and innovation is less process oriented, right? A lot of it, you learn, you experiment, right? You think you solve one issue. Oh, look, I have a model. It seems to be good. Now, well, how do you deal with bias? How do you deal with deploying this in production? How do you deal with observing changes? How do you actually marry the clinical workflow, right, what people do with what the system does? And there are kind of those multiple gates, and I think that the successful organizations are the ones that really understand that this innovation or R&D mindset and the way you kind of manage these projects needs to be different, right? Than how you estimate, how you plan, how you set expectations for your more kind of traditional established processes. And that's the main thing I would recommend. Start with assuming this is, it's of course you want to do real things, but assume it's a learning exercise, assume there are skills you need to build, right? And really want to evaluate yourself on how fast you learn. I'm
really glad to hear somebody else say that, because the number of times I've had to remind people that there's a reason the word science is in the phrase data science. It is an experimental research thing. I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to solve this. We have tools and techniques and methods to go and try and answer the question. It is not traditional software development where you can guarantee that, yes, at the end of this sprint block, whatever you want to call it, we are going to have a working model that magically does everything you want to do. It doesn't work that way because of the way that it's dependent upon what the real world looks like. It depends on what that data looks like. It depends upon what the business needs. And I'm curious, David, from your experience with working with companies, because I've been at that startup environment and semi-consulting space, and the number of times that I've seen companies latch on to the AI buzzword and they want to now do a deep neural network. It's just fit a straight line to the data maybe and do a linear regression, and that'll get you 80 to 90% of the way there. And it's fully understandable. It'll make your business automated in this way and improve these things. And I've had pushback from that because no, that's not sexy enough. I want the deep. It's like, but you're not even curating your data well enough at the moment to go anywhere near that. And then I've seen us having pushback, trying to help them innovate because it's not fast enough for them. Even though they're so far behind that would still make a major impact potentially on their business. Have you experienced that as well?
Oh, look, absolutely. And sometimes I have to remind my own team, yes, we are working, all of our customers are doing this for the first time. So it's really, like in the 80s, the relational database was the big thing, right? Or the personal computer. And then we had the internet and we had, mobile computing. And each one of them, it was, this will automatically, you need to rethink your business and how that works, which more companies do not do. And absolutely, we see everything. We see, yes, we see people who assume, as you say, that this is, a completely solved problem, as you say, without even having to look at the data. We see people who ask for science fiction, absolutely. And mostly, but look, I think the people who do it well are the people who come and say, look, this is a new thing we need to learn. Right. And the first thing we need to do, as I say, we need to pick a problem that actually makes sense for the business. Right. And we need to see what works. I would say absolutely. In many cases, yes, we have found that, as you said, what you need there is, linear regression, maybe, with some data cleansing and some regular expressions. And as you say, you really are 90% of the way there. Right. And as you say, this is actually going to make you money, help your customers, right, help you grow the business. And this is what you have to do. And then really, you need to be talking to the right people, right? There are the people who drive the business, and there are people who want to, pursue shiny objects, right? And you need to see who you work with, and also from an organizational perspective, yes, you as an adopter, you need to have the right people in the room, right, so that you do not pursue shiny objects, right? We absolutely see all of that, and I would say it's it's typical, right? You get as you said, it is a buzzword. Right, some people want the fairy dust of the new and magical, and they come because of that, and some natural filtering has to happen, right? So that really focus on doing the right thing, and I completely agree with you. What you want, first of all, as a provider, yes, you have to come in a consultative fashion, because I think that just like you, I see that a lot of what we do is we educate, right, and a lot of the value and responsibilities is just that. And yes, and you when you buy this, you need to come and say, look, first of all, here's my business, right? Here's what I want to achieve from business perspective, and then yes, you tell me if this applies at all or what we should experiment. Absolutely.
Heather, from your experience as an educator, educating the next generation of professionals in large corporations and also medium-sized businesses in the US, what's your experience regarding what David and Adam are saying?
Yeah, I actually love what both of David and Adam have talked about. It's we're seeing very similar things. So we're sitting in a space of like, okay, people want to do stuff like this with AI and machine learning and the data that they have. But it's also that interesting space of, leaders want this done today. They want it done yesterday. So they're trying as hard as they can to figure out, okay, how do we deploy the right programs or the right strategy that's going to help people learn effectively? But it's also, I think there's a gap as, like you can have the best laid plans and you can have the best strategy out there, but there's also a space of, I don't know that every organization has the right level of psychological safety for people to say, okay, I'm going to start clearing off the things off my plate that don't make sense anymore. Everybody out there is doing some report or some piece of their job that's done because 2 people 2 jobs ago started doing it and no one ever took it off your plate. And like 2 people are looking at that report. But I think there's this fear, especially now in the current economy, where as an individual, you're looking at it going, well, I don't want to not be busy to take time for learning, because then what if I get fired? What if I get laid off because, I don't look busy enough? I think there's a real challenge on both how do we get as leadership to prioritize effectively to make sure people are focusing on the things that matter the most for them and for the business. But then as people find ways to carve out time to learn and to grow, to get the skills that we need to access the data that exists, how do you create that psychological safety for people and the actual physical safety for people so that when they start to take things off their plate and spend more and more of their time learning, that isn't penalized and that people aren't negatively impacted for shifting into that space of like, okay, I know I'm missing some of the skills. I know I need to upskill in a couple of places to be able to be really effective. Or even, we don't want to punish people who find ways to automate portions of their job because they're more effective. It shouldn't become a barrier to that kind of longer term success and innovation. So I think there's a few challenges that exist that we need to kind of wrestle with as a whole to be successful in this space.
I've seen, sorry, I was just going to say, I've been in a meeting where I've seen that literally happen in a similar sort of sense, and it was really it was a strange experience. So we were at the time I was brought in effectively as a consulting group to run a proof of concept project, and the senior management were all about, we want to innovate. We know that if we stand still, we're going to become dinosaurs and fall behind the times. And we were asked to go and interview with all of the subdivisions to find out where there might be a good project to do. And I went to this meeting, and the person I was sat across clearly was like, why am I here? And actually they had no clue why they were there. They were head of a division. Nobody in the organization had briefed them that they were running this. And I was explaining their mission to them. And they were like, yeah, but why am I going to spend time doing this? I'm meeting my KPIs and that's how I get my bonus. If I spend time doing this, or if I've got to spend some of my own budget on this, then my profit margin is going to look worse and I'm not going to do well. So yeah, no, great, thanks, but no thanks. So I spent an hour of my time that was billed back to that company in a room, and they're internal to their own organization. They hadn't laid the groundwork to do these things, or as you say, to kind of either give the safety or the incentive. And we all know what KPIs are like. They may have a goal, but people will work to the KPI that serves them best, not necessarily to what the KPI was meant to achieve. And I guess, Heather, how would you engage with an organization, I guess, to try and get them to fix their own internal systems on that? Because I guess you may have seen more of it.
Yeah, we actually talked to them up front about understanding, there's this foundational layer of stuff that needs to happen for any kind of learning initiatives to be successful. So part of it is we sit down with their executive team and we start to talk about stuff like, okay, what are the systems that are in place that are potentially going to impede your ability to innovate and to get people to actually drive for this change you're seeking? So sometimes it is that stuff is like, do you have KPIs and OKRs and things tied to bonus where it's not going to incentivize people to support the learning of their people? Or just like the example you shared where it's like, well, but if I meet these things, that's how I get my bonus. Why would I change anything if what's happening is working? And even down to middle manager levels, they're held accountable for a certain standard of work. So if they're, running an engineering team and they have to commit so many lines of code or whatever it looks like to be successful, they're not going to try to promote people internally to create that internal talent mobility and to retain people within the organization if it's potentially going to look bad on them that, well, you promoted these people out, but then your metrics tanked because you had to rehire new people. So you're the one who's, you're now in trouble. It's like, sometimes it's the broader systems that actually create the friction for us where people can't be successful because they're like, well, my family depends on my bonus. My family depends on me having this job. Why would I change if I know I can keep doing what I'm doing and it's working? And I think sometimes that's hard to hear is like, what's working is working in some ways. That's why companies are still here today. But what's working today isn't necessarily what's going to get you to where you want to go in the future. And I think it's really hard for people to let go of some of the old ways of thinking about and being in a workplace to successfully iterate into that phase of like real innovation and change. But again, it's also hard because like for you as an individual, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're not going to rock the boat and be like, I've got this innovative, great idea if you're worried that you're going to lose your job next week. It's always easier to just be like, I'm going to keep my head down, do my job, not rock the boat or cause problems for people. But yeah, so we start, talking bigger picture, talking systemic change. We also fully address up front is like, you have to acknowledge that as we create space for people to learn, there will be a dip in productivity. And you can either choose to ride that dip and come out on the other side where people are growing and they're learning and they're innovating, or you can get panicked at the bottom of the dip and go, too much is happening. We're going to go back to status quo. And then it's a constant backpedaling of people going, see, look, none of this matters. Nobody cares. Every time we try to roll out something new, it just dies anyway. And it creates that narrative for people like, I don't really have to listen to leadership because every time we change something, it just dies in 6 months anyway. It's giving adequate time for these changes to take place and knowing that you're not just changing a process or procedure. You've got to work with the way that people think about work and their personal, like everything that you bring to a job. My tolerance for change might be significantly different than David's or yours, Adam, and it's like, you need to understand that everybody needs to be worked with in that different way. And I think David talked about it earlier is like, you've got to be able to address both the bigger problems, but the individual level problems too, and the individual challenges people face to make sure that people are not only looked at, holistically for the business, but how do I need different support than somebody else?
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that there is a symbiotic relationship between innovation, creating new technologies that can automate or support a more agile way of working, and the change management required in the organization? But part of that symbiotic process is also a friction. There are frictions that not every single part fits perfectly because there are two different forces. If you don't manage the change and the purpose at the strategic company level and the individual perspective, this is not going to benefit from the adoption of these new technologies, all these new infrastructure and algorithms we have now available. Do you think that the narrative, the rhetoric needs to change to address this?
Yeah, it's making sure that people are addressed at the level that they're at and that they have the information that they need to be successful. It's like, you've got to get down to the what's in it for me, from the topmost person to the bottommost person in your organization. Everyone's got to understand why this matters, why it's relevant, and how their job impacts that change. If not, you end up in that position where Adam shows up and he's explaining to somebody else what should have already taken place in the organization. So you have to lay that foundation. I think the other piece of it is getting people to understand, if you want innovation, you have to stop being afraid of failure, and you have to stop letting egos and status quo thinking get in the way. If you have an organization where the first failure gets fired, no one's going to innovate because they don't want to be that guy or that girl. They're going to do the things that keep their job. You have to celebrate failure, and you have to create spaces where people can fail fast and fail small, so that the failure that happens isn't a big multi-billion-dollar loss. Get people failing where it's, hundreds or just thousands of dollars on the line, where you can learn from that mistake and you can get better and you can, share what's learned. But if you're not creating those small ways that people can do something, fall on their face and pick themselves back up and learn that, nobody gets fired for this. We can learn together. We can share the lessons learned. I think those are some of the things that I think of when you're thinking about the intersection of that change management and innovation.
I was just discussing this recently within the team. We were coming up with we were trying to figure out how to improve our data science processes when it came to agile planning and how to fit in with the wider organization. And what we realized was that we needed to define two types of criteria when we were working on an agile epic. And effectively it was, what's the completion criteria? i.e. we're done with this, we're finished. And what's the progression criteria? That was good enough to do something else with, such that, as you say, we can go and do a data science experiment. and we're going to time box it. So it's like, we're going to invest 4 weeks of effort into this. There's our completion criteria. Whether it works or doesn't work, we spend 4 weeks and we are not failing. We are spending our 4 weeks to get the answer. And based on that answer, yes, we may or may not abandon the project at that point, but that's fine. And again, I like the way you decide, it's giving that permission. Failure isn't a bad thing. It's we did an experiment, it didn't work. We'll move on to the next experiment. Or it did work, great. Now let's take it somewhere else and let's build on it. And there's value. And yeah, if people are afraid to do stuff because if it doesn't work, then there's a problem, then yeah, you completely stymie any type of innovation or data science or development work in that context. If you have to have a guaranteed outcome, positive outcome, then you can't innovate.
Yeah, and I think it's also that space of giving people enough time. Like, you can't force innovation. Like, you can't say you have to check a box and submit 2 innovations a quarter. Like, everyone's going to submit garbage just to check the box and get it done. But also, if your team is buried under so much work that they literally can't step back far enough to go, what would make this easier, more effective, more productive? Like, if they don't have the time and space to sit there and go, how could I make this easier and better for me and for the people coming behind me or the people around me? Or what does the impact look like if I change this? You're forcing people into that rapid cycle of like, I just have to put out the next fire to keep my job and to keep going, instead of stepping back and saying, hey, wait, there's a problem upstream that's causing me to constantly be on fire here. How do I go put that out instead of constantly trying to like just solve my way through what's rolling down onto my plate? But again, like if we're so focused on being busy and being productive, you don't get enough space. And I get that not everyone needs to necessarily. Some jobs are about you show up, you do the thing, you get it done. That's fine. But I think a lot more jobs need to have more of that space to be able to sit there and think about, okay, how could we make this better? And how could we change the things that are impacting me upstream to make things better for the folks that are downstream from the work that we're doing?
So I've seen echoes of that in a bad way, from bad leadership, where they've cut teams down to make sure, well, that's the amount of staff you need to get the work done. But then there is no space or capacity to innovate. And then if something does go wrong, things get worse because you're rapidly trying to put out the fires and you're behind schedule and things get worse. And I get concerned in times like now when we're potentially going into recessions and everything else, because yeah, this is suddenly, oh, well, we need to tighten our belts. And therefore, and actually cutting back on innovation actually makes you less efficient potentially as an organization, because you can't fix those systemic pieces that have been building up over time and things.
David, are there any areas that actual technology could help with this conversation or translation of technology to business needs? I'm thinking perhaps, for example, the new annotation tools that we have seen now, instead of being seen as an additional task, those could be seen as promoting a dialogue between business domain experts and the machine learning AI professionals. Are these other examples that we could think about?
Yes, definitely. I think one of the job of tools, especially kind of software tools, development tools, it's not just automating piece of work. It's also basically kind of encoding a process or methodology, right? So you can see today, if you work in data science, just like if you do software developments, there's Git and there's here's how you should do version control and work within with a team of people, right? And there are tools around, here's how you should think about planning testing. Here's how you should plan about Docker and Kubernetes. Here's how you should plan about packaging, right? Large complex applications and monitoring them and updating them. So in data science, yes, we have tools for data scientists. We have MLOps tools for experiment tracking, for model versioning, for putting models in production. Definitely something to consider to use. We have tools like the annotation lab. And yes, we definitely see this move to kind of low code or no code solutions. Right, and we have the free annotation lab, and we have on our team we have doctors and lawyers who are training models and tuning models, and that's definitely one of the one of the friction points, right? Because if you're building a model for oncology that tries for example to extract cancer staging from a pathology report, the deep learning data science work it's hard and complex, but you also need actual oncologists. right? Because there's a whole lot of edge cases there that are super important if you actually have that specific kind of tumor, right? And yes, and those tools can help you work together, right? Where one side comes and says, yes, look, I need this data to train a deep learning model, and and it needs to be in this certain format, and the other comes and says, look, I don't understand what you just said, but you have to take care of these 41 pages of edge cases, right? And your model has to reflect that and be unbiased and be accurate. Right, or it's clinically useless. Absolutely, and same with legal, same with finance models, and that there are tools for data engineering, there are tools for data quality, and data quality monitoring needs to be in place. There are tools for monitoring models in production, right? So one of the challenges, not challenges, one of the facts of life with machine learning is that as soon as you put a model in production, it starts degrading because the world changes, right? And you need to keep up to date. And there are tools, that do that. So I think, look, I think definitely, trying to pick up or use some of these tools is one way to learn, right? Because just like just because when you use any email tool, just the way the tool is designed and user interface design gives you good hints about how you should use it, right? And how it's intended to be used properly, right? And definitely, if you use some of data science tools, you can assume that there's a lot of lessons learned, right, in why the workflow and the UI, right, and the permissions, right, and the actions are a certain way, right? And that's definitely something that can be a shortcut for many organizations. Absolutely. You're muted again.
Where are we in terms of ensuring the transparency of these AI models and the way we develop them with or without the intervention of people in the rest of the organizations?
I say we are very, very early on. I would compare where we are with AI now is to where we were with cars in the 1880s. Right, or with electricity in the 1850s, it's like it's here, you can do it. Everybody knows it's the big, the next big thing. But we haven't figured out anything yet, right? We haven't figured out how to scale it, how to make it safe, how to make it responsible, how to communicate it. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of just outright hot air and claims that are unsubstantiated. Absolutely. I think. There needs to be some shared responsibility. So definitely, I can say, as an engineer, there are things that we do and we need to do around bias, around explainability, around reproducibility, right? Around just even making sure that the labels used to train data are accurate and correct, right? So there are statistical models and tools you can use to do that. And then there are things we cannot do, right? So for example, if you have a clinical model and the model applies poorly to certain race or ethnicity, right? Because there's just no data, right? And we cannot just invent data and then the model work for it, right? You need to actually go to the field and talk to those people and collect samples and understand how they react to a certain indication or a certain condition, right? There's also biases in human processes, right? I think you see it a lot in recruiting or criminal law models. If you train a model based on the data, the model is going to be racist or biased because that's what people actually do day to day, right, in those real world systems, right? And that's not a technology problem, right? It's something you can actually use a model to fix that, right? But then also you get pushback from the organizations once they realize that, like, hey, wait a minute, are we actually giving all those people equal opportunities now, right? And there's and that's going to be a slower moving discussion. So I think we are really early days.
It's a really interesting point, and it kind of comes back through in the data for good and discussions in that community, because everybody's very hyper aware of biases in AI systems and discrimination, as they should be. The thing that I always feel they miss when they say, well, turn off that model because the Home Office is rejecting visa applications. It's like but it's learned what the human people were doing. All you're doing is going to a slower, racist, biased methodology, potentially. At least in some respects, I almost go with, well, at least if the computer did it, it's got through everything really fast. That frees up people's time for you to appeal and fix it. Now, that is in no way a good approach to a
Yes.
system, but I find it very curious that people seem to hold AI algorithms and computers to higher standards than human beings. But I suspect it's because they feel that it's easier to argue with a human being. But a faceless corporation versus the computer at the faceless corporation are just as hard to interact with if you're trying to argue with why did I get my insurance, why was my insurance claim rejected or something along those lines. And I think it is something that is a real challenge just within society, that when we make decisions, it needs to be explainable, it needs to be quantifiable and understandable, but it needs to be held, the human systems, to the same sort of standards that we're trying to hold some of these AI systems, because it is a really important element of the discussion to have. But yeah, I find it curious when I see, oh, we've turned off the algorithm. It's like, yeah, but you're just going to just manually with human beings carry on doing exactly the same process that you coded probably into that algorithm. So the system isn't being made any better by turning off the computer in this case.
Yep. No, I completely agree with you. I think it was a very famous case in the US about an automated system to actually used in criminal law to decide who will get bail, right? And one of the very simple studies showed that, if you're a black person, it was more than twice as much more likely to actually be recommended to stay in jail instead of going home to your family until your trial date than a white person, right? And there was an outcry. And I was wondering the same thing. Why is the outcry around the AI? I know the outcry about the fact that this is what's happening right now today, right, for the past century, right, for black people in the real criminal justice system, right? I mean, if you so as you said, the issue is the model you can actually fix very easily. Fixing all the people in the system and the decision they make on a daily basis, that's right. That's really what's
hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and some of the pushback is. You can come and say, look, I can actually fix the model and I can have a non-biased model and I can deploy it, right? And then if you try to do that, the people in the system come and say, wait a minute, we kind of like it that way. And of course, they will say it in a very nice and polite way, but you'll see a lot of pushback, right? You'll see pushbacks definitely from insurance companies, right? It kind of say, well, if you actually start approving all those claims, that's actually not how we want to operate, right? And there's and people. I think that there are a lot of businesses and social systems that benefit from this obscurity, right? And I think it's definitely a challenge for society and not a technical one. Yeah.
Those are very interesting ideas. Trying to draw a parallel with what is being discussed this week in the COP27 about climate change and the interventions that governments are trying to agree in the area of AI, machine learning, natural language processing. What are the plausible scenarios? And who you think is going to be taking the lead or continuing taking the lead at the private sector with the companies that we know, the brands, for example, on social media or other prominent sectors, or who you think should be taking some form of intervention or playing a more active role?
In what context are you thinking of tech engaging? I mean, obviously there are envirotech companies who are actively trying to solve problems. I mean, are you talking about more like sustainability and that aspect?
You can take the question as at any. You can pivot the question as you wish.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I think some of it again leans back into society to a level, because if you are trying to attract customers in a competitive space, then you have to appeal to what those customers want their world to look like. So if you're becoming more sustainable, if you are supporting specific, if, for example, your Facebook, I mean, I think I remember they made a big deal about how they built their own solar farm to power their, they're going carbon neutral because they know they are big power draws. But we all know that, we can't just keep using fossil fuels forevermore. I think there's definitely conversations in that space, because certainly anything to do with AI, when you start talking about GPT-3 and everything else, you're talking about, months of super clusters of computers churning through, burning through lots of fuels in order to support those. And so we kind of need to be slightly aware. And I mean, equally, it's why some of those tools and technologies are out of reach of the general business without leasing that model out, because nobody can go and afford to run that at scale to build that general sort of model in the same fashion. So I think it's going to be driven probably by user awareness, and that will, I think, equally, even at a corporate level, you want that branding of going with we're a zero carbon company or something like that. So even the services that they're buying, because they can still pass that on to their end consumer, that they can still kind of have that badge. I think that helps certainly drive these things forward. But I think it's the ecology game in some respects, I think, is almost as young and in its early days as what we're talking about with AI and tech, because I know that I know some people in the agri-tech industry who are still trying to figure out, how do we actually estimate the value of that carbon neutral project? Because we're just using general statistics to kind of guess how much carbon capture is going to happen if we go and fund that project. And so actually, going on a slightly different tangent, there's a load of AI modeling work going on as to how on earth can we even figure out where we're capturing carbon and how to incorporate those things, that then goes into the whole carbon trading business, which, because if you're going to trade on it, you want some certification that what you're buying is real. And so you've now got a whole other industry almost spinning off the top of that. And I think there's a lot of interesting innovation and things going on in that space.
I mean, I can talk a bit about what we do. I mean, John Snow Labs is a carbon neutral company, and we're very proud to say we've been carbon neutral for the entire history of the company. And that means, first of all, it's simple things like, working from home and minimizing business travel, right? And those things. But for us, yes, we do train NLP models. And one of the things, I mean, I'd like to see more is especially, to your point, more awareness. So like we don't, spend months to train a single models because of this specific reason, right? And I think really just like, security and privacy and bias, it just need to be another engineering criterion that you need to have in place. Right. And as you said, there are some cases we kind of say, well, okay, this is easy. This is just, so off the chart that just we should not do it. But what we find is it's definitely possible. I would say, though, at this point, I think, we do it because, we want to do it. We think it's the right thing. It's not a push from customers. Okay, at least not at this point. I think on the worldwide level, yes, we're heading towards a catastrophe, right? We're going to have serious problems. This will not be solved by a software company doing something, right? This needs to be, this is a much bigger problem, right? That world leaders need to actually agree to significantly change how we live to do it. So I think at this point, we do what we can within our own house, which, is something each one of us can do, but also I think we need to understand that the limit here, right? This is right now, we're obviously heading in the wrong place as a civilization.
Yeah, I think it's these things that we're talking about, they're the more like wicked problems that people talk about. There's no one size fits all solution. There is no like either or. I think when you think about companies that are, like we're going carbon neutral or something, it's like, okay, you can go carbon neutral, that's good, but that doesn't mean the company itself is completely good and holistic and doing the right things, because you can be carbon neutral, but also still exploiting workers in China. You can be carbon neutral, but you could also be dumping waste into the rivers in the towns that you operate in. I think we need to separate a little bit from like the either or, like somebody is good or bad, and look really holistically about what matters to us as a society, to us as people, and start to make choices accordingly. So it's like, yes, you can vote with your dollars, your time spent on, like I'm going to support this company by utilizing their app or by shopping with them. But also like if you're thinking about climate change as a whole, it's like, well, it's not one thing that you as a person or that companies all need to do that's going to completely revolutionize the world. Like, yes, there are some big things, but it's also like as an individual consumer, yes, I could choose to drive an electric car or a gas car. I can choose to eat meat or not eat meat. I can choose to purchase locally grown produce or produce that's being shipped across the globe to me. I think there's so many ways. And I think we all get stuck in that but I just want to have the big bang. I want to do something impactful. And sometimes the most impactful thing is the day-to-day choices that we make and the little incremental shifts. It's not just like, I'm going to completely, throw out all the modern conveniences of life, but it's like, maybe instead of buying disposable razors, I buy something that's got, a lesser plastic impact on the environment. Maybe I'm not going to use plastic straws in restaurants. Like, I know it doesn't solve everything all at once, but I think we underestimate the power of making those individual choices and the impact that has on society as a whole. Like, again, it's not going to solve everything today, and it might not be enough. But I think if we start to work in that direction and we start to, vote with our dollars and support the companies that are going in that direction, it can make a difference. And that's the stuff that kind of drives change. Once you hit that tipping point, it makes it easier, or you get more of that force to push companies to make the changes that are necessary.
We're starting to get closer to the end of the session, not yet, but how would you summarize, in your own words, what will be the 4 or 5 key elements you should consider when you start thinking about, you want to start experimenting with these technologies in your organization, not-for-profit or business company, how you start building a team, what are the things you should be looking at?
So I would, so there's key things in my experience that make life easier. One is figuring out what it is you're doing right now, because again, I've been in that space where it's like that. I need to make this process better, and I go with, okay, great. So how well does it work right now? So, well, what do you mean? So, well, how are you measuring how well it works? Because if you can't tell me that right now, how are we going to know that I made it better? Because if you have nothing to measure, there's no way to move that forward. And also it's a way of establishing how much value does it have to you as an organization. And that doesn't have to be monetary value. It can be worker time spent filing paperwork. Great, I get that time back from my staff that they can be doing something more productive because I don't need them to be doing those sorts of things. That's one of the key things that from the establishing the business problem aspect is. The other thing, having been the founding data scientist in a startup where I have to be the unicorn trying to do everything, you can't. You're never going to, certainly not going to find an expert in every element of every type of data science and AI technology. There's too much. It's not possible. There are people who are very good at picking up what they need to learn and figuring it out, but it's a team game. It's a team sport, and it needs to link into that business understanding. And I 100% support what Heather was saying earlier on. You need to, if you're going to want them to help you innovate, you need to give them permission to fail. But there should be a stakeholder there directing what is the most valuable thing for us to try and do. And sometimes the most valuable thing to do is, first of all, figure out what is it we're doing right now and where are the pain points, and then move on. That would be the starting point for me.
So we have a baseline, pain points. We need 3 more points.
Well, I think I would add to that. I think you definitely want to make sure you put a team together. As you say, have people who actually have are given kind of the time and the space to do this. You want to have a mix of people, right? You want to have, data scientists. You want to have people who actually understand kind of the data, the domain experts. You want to have the business domain experts, right? You want the people who understand how this would actually serve, right? Your customers or your business to make this work. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things you don't know at the beginning is really where most of the effort will be, right? Sometimes most of the effort will actually be, can we set up measurements for this process, right? Often a lot of the effort is, can we just get the data, right? So that we can do some analysis to build something. Sometimes most of the effort is, once we have a model, how do you actually integrate it, right? So let's say we found, customers that are at risk for churn, and we are really good at knowing who is at risk for churn. Now we need the whole department to call these people, right, and help them, right, or try to actually induce them to stay, to do something, right? That may be where the effort is. So I think there needs to be the flexibility, that access to leadership, right, to come and say, actually, we don't need 8 more data scientists. We need 10 more of this other kind of person, right? Or we need to to use our money expertise this way. So that's on the team side. And the other thing I would say is definitely try to learn from people who have done it before, right? Because, probably for you within your organization, it may be the first time you're trying to do this, but there are probably other organizations, within your industry who have done something similar, right? So whether you're doing something in customer support, right, or in finance or in drug discovery, right, you probably know the first one to address the problem, and you can probably save yourself a good couple of years just by even finding a couple of people who have done that and can help you and can come just tell, okay, here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to 1, 2, 3, and you should probably focus on this first. I think those are kind of the really very small things you can do to really cut a year or two from the journey.
Thank you, David. Drawing from what you said, Heather, is your organization doing work in this area, trying to promote the sharing of good practices among different stakeholders in your communities?
Yeah, I think on top of what's been said already, it's the space of we have to get to the point of relentlessly prioritizing our work. Like, again, there's finite amounts of time that everybody has. There's 1,000,003 things we could be doing. So it goes back to what Adam was saying is like, what should we be doing? What's going to matter the most to us and where do we need to focus? And it needs to be a thing where if I'm an executive leader and I'm going through my organization, I need to get the same answer on what are your priorities from the senior level VPs all the way down through to your frontline managers. If the message isn't trickling down where every single manager and leader along the way has the same understanding and expectations, and obviously it shifts on what that priority looks like based on the roles on that team. But it's a huge problem if only the top layer of people where their bonuses are tied to this outcome understand what you're trying to drive to. I think the other thing is you have to be willing to start somewhere. So whether it's a small pilot, it's just one team in your organization. I think the organizations that are just saying, we've got to push pause. Everyone's burned out on change. Everybody's, doesn't have the capacity. It's like, okay, but where can you build the capacity? Where can you build the ability to fail and fail fast and to start to drive change? I think every company is going to continue to suffer from that lack of the right tech talent if they don't start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Start scaling up and educating one group of people or one type of role in your organization. Figure out what works and then scale and sustain those practices across your organization. But there is no more time to sit and say like, we'll hit this, after the recession and when we can hire more people and we have more capacity. It's like, well, if you wait for that, somebody, whether it's your competition or a new and innovative startup, is going to come from behind and just surpass you because they're already doing the things or they're already getting ahead of what you're doing, especially bigger legacy companies. We see so much, there's so much friction in getting past status quo and how things have been done. And I think it's like, even if you're massive, even if you're hundreds of thousands of global employees, you've got to start somewhere and you've got to start today. Find a group that is a little bit more change tolerant, or find the group of people where you're willing to pull a little bit of their work off to be that innovation hub and figure out what's going to work for your organization. But don't put it off. Figure it out, prioritize everything that's on your plate. And again, start somewhere.
Thank you. Well, we have a very interesting and insightful discussion. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to share with you your experience and the lessons on behalf of the World Innovation and Change Management Institute and our academic partners. I think this is going to be a session that's going to open eyes to companies, organizations, and individuals that want to start working with these new technologies and see how they can improve and do good in the world and also in their lives. So I'd like to thank you again. Thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.